And record Ed. Very good. Let's begin. I originally was going to do this. I thought we'd get through the chapter. We won't. Undoubtedly be Friday. So I try to keep consistent. So by the time the guys get here, I've already got this twice. So it's sort of interesting in that regard. So, and I really was going to frame it, but this is really setting the background for Friday. And Fridays, we're going to complete the chapter by really summarizing maybe the most important concept, homeostasis, which is internal balance in the body and any living thing. So homeostasis is really what it's all about, keeps us inside. I mean, I just took off the sweater because it was cold this morning. Now it's warm in here. That's how we adjust. Okay, we can do that externally. Think of lower order animals. I mean, there's different ways that my dog would have to deal with it, panting more, blowing up, whatever. Cat. He doesn't think he knows he can. And understand, so we're able to do clothing, we could flip the switch and turn the AC on, a little bit different. But internally, being able to manage by a system of feedback mechanisms, both negative, nearly exclusively, and some, albeit few, but very important, positive feedback mechanisms. We will get to that. But it just turns out we need to know more about what's going on. I'm trying, and this is more contextual. Is it for anybody? I mean, I'm not far off that way. From one of the other classes, I decided to transition from practicing to teaching as a consultant. I ended up, and this will be therapeutic, torture everybody else. Now, I was sitting there 20 years ago in a class at La Roche, in the North Hills. There was a bunch of people studying that type of stuff. So I'm not that necessarily fun. You sit back there and go, wait, do I really need this to be a better nurse, to be a better healthcare practitioner, to be a better physician's assistant, whatever? And the answer is, for a lot of it, no. But it should enhance your overall understanding of what's going on. I have a very simple teaching philosophy that I told everybody to take. If I'm not enthusiastic, why would you be? If I sit up here and just read the PowerPoints, and you got people, I know. People sitting there, I have to give out, I mean, we have to have it. Some other cat. I matriculated in college in 1969. We had other substances. Actual limitations in front of her. She's sitting here before I got her. It was right after an event that happened at some Woodstock. History. Yeah. So, living things. Principally, we're talking about us in this class. It applies to every living thing. It could be a single cell, like a bacteria, not nearly as complex, doesn't have membrane-bound organelles. It's a different kind of a cell that you'll learn about, many of you in micro. Many of you will probably be interested in that. And the cell we talk about is called eukaryotic. EUKARYOTIC. Stands for membrane-bound organelles. Actually, it stands for with a kernel or with a core, meaning a nucleus, but that's a membrane-bound. There's a lot of membrane-bound. That's what bacteria do. Bacteria, as you will learn in their utter simplicity, without all these compartments and activities, do the thing that they do very well, very easily. All of their energies are dedicated to one thing, reproduction. But we have a lot more complexity, which is both good and bad. Bacteria are mostly good guys, so don't let me speak of that. Cells, eukaryotic, membrane-bound organelles, including the nucleus. They accomplish energy transformations, which we typically call metabolism. And I'll erase my prescription. Metabolism really is a combination of two processes. Many of you have heard this before. I'll just put metabolism here. Basically, it's a combination of doing two things. Creating bonds, building stuff. So I'll just say put an arrow up for building up, and that really is how we store energy. We store energy in chemical bonds. When the opposite, so anabolism, think of anabolic steroid. Metabolism means like a catastrophe to break it down, and that's how we release energy to do things. We release some of that energy to build stuff up. That's why there's sort of a balance with regard to energy utilization, how much energy we take in and how much energy we have to utilize. That whole like 2,000 calories a day, that deal. I use that up in a visit to the Open Up Bakery. I dress. I get it off running back and forth. So I'll give you a little more information about that as we proceed on. DNA and RNA. We'll explore them in detail. But all living things have to have both DNA and RNA. DNA basically does two things. We'll go over all this in detail. DNA is responsible for reproduction, when you see it in the future. And we're basically conferring or being the holder of and continuation of the genetic code, basically telling us what proteins to make. Because again, you are what your proteins say you are. And RNA really is basically the way that DNA works. It works through the magic of RNA, making the proteins, assembling them properly, prepping them properly. Living cells have to have it. If you take a virus, by definition, not living. It's not a cell to start with. It has either DNA or RNA. DNA viruses, HPV is a DNA virus, COVID and so on. They're similar, but they work different. Different problems associated with it that are there. Boundaries, that's all part of, and they're each a boundary. It isn't just an external boundary, they're internal boundaries. By definition, all of those boundaries are semi-permeable membrane. You don't have anything that's impermeable. We have some areas which are hard and more difficult to permeate. For instance, there's a boundary that basically things that are water soluble can't get through. It's very famous. There's more than one. It's called the blood-brain barrier. You will learn about it in this class at the very end of the semester. When we get nutrients to our brain or try to get medicines to our brain, someone had, heaven forbid, bacterial meningitis. You can't just use any antibiotic. It has to be able to penetrate the blood-brain barrier. If someone's on a psychoactive medication, let's say they have, unfortunately, depression or something similar to that, you can't just use any medicine. It has to be able to penetrate that barrier. It has a unique anatomical construction. Now we have a relationship with function that creates that barrier. It's twofold. We'll actually be talking about that not too far. Start talking about how cells kind of interfere. Okay? So all of those boundaries, whether internal or external, all this compartmentalization responds to stimuli. Again, if you take something simplistic like a bacteria, it's very straightforward how it responds to stimuli. Either attract or repel. That's it. Generally by chemicals, can be light, can be magnetism, can be air, heat. But the reality for us, we're a little more sophisticated. I just took off my sweater, responding to stimuli. Trying to keep you guys awake, responding to respond. We're in the afternoon, we're feedback. And lastly, or next to lastly, again, sort of one of the roles DNA plays, the idea of reproduction, sexual and asexual. I keep saying it in class. It's all of the asexual one, mitosis. Asexual is comparatively limited if you think of all the activities your body does. Very limited amount, and actually for comparatively limited when it occurs. A lot of it occurs before birth. 250,000 or so eggs form in the preliminary incomplete stage, and then they'll start to complete themselves to the onset of menstruation, so we get to these little bits. And men, it's a little bit different. The whole system really doesn't start off and different than pigs, and goes down, and we'll see all that as time goes on. Unfortunately, that AP too. So interesting. So even though it's important, the asexual, the mitosis aspect is everything, because again, We don't repair, we replace. If you got to repair, it's going to repair with scar tissue. That's me. I mean, we're replacing. Many of you had, and certainly at 3 o'clock and 6 o'clock today, you're going to have lab. Many of you had lab already, right? You have a lot of work to do, don't you? Many assignments have come your way, have they not? Just smiled and waved again on my way here to Dr. Robbins. I could see his enthusiasm levels even more so than mine. But the idea is you learned from my understanding about lining cells. We'll talk a little bit about them today. Okay? And what they are, and that's coming up very, very shortly. But those are things that we do constantly. So much so, I do this, I just shed cells. All of a sudden, I swallow some saliva. The wheels have been curved in your mouth. I just swallowed some cells. Those cells are continuously being replaced. All of your bones, I told, have been replaced twice. Their entirety. All of them. New bones. Same old bones, but new bones. So all of that's part of, and that indeed is part of growth and development, which we don't touch on a lot in this class, but is really important. Development is sort of a generic term to look at it. And that's kind of coming up my concept of it. It's beyond the scope of this class and beyond the scope of my expertise, so I can share some information about it. And we'll endeavor to do so. Introductory remarks, less than 15 minutes. I'm on a roll. Voila. You remember this thing? These are, and one of the neat things about this text is they do throw some clinical stuff, and that's the context to understand. It's not that some of you may be doing this if you're in the health sciences field. You may be involved in nuclear medicine. You may be involved in advanced imaging. That's what these things are. They're not new under the sun. Non-invasive is why they're good. Non-invasive things mean, as far as we know, don't hurt you. You're not entering. When you hear the one that's not non-invasive, kind of by definition, is when you have a CT scan, is really an X-ray. Tomography stands for computerized tomography. Tomography's been around forever. X-rays have been around a long time. We used to do tomography in our office or in the hospital. You take an X-ray at 90, then at 85, and you just change the angle and look at the different shots. If you were trying to see, let's say, we used it for something called an osseous occlusion or an osseous bar, like an extra bony bar that would occur sometimes and would cause problems in the extremities. Okay, you see it better with certain views. Well, they took this in the computer age and basically created computerized tomography, so you could do this not only in one plane, but in different planes. Okay, and then with the aid of computers creating an algorithm, it actually is, and with contrast materials, meaning we can image certain things, be they organs, and even though it's wonderful for bones, wonderful for bone tumors, etc., things like that. Why it's not invasive? X-rays. Same thing, if we talk about an MRI with contrast, they've injected you with something, and contrast, now it's gone from non-invasive to invasive. If something that potentially could cause harm, even an X-ray, which not technically, you're not sticking a needle in, certainly can cause harm. So non-invasive is good as far as we know. Ultrasound's been around forever. Ultrasound is more than 100 years. Ultrasound is high frequency sound waves that effectively penetrate the skin, which is relatively thin, and we go off different densities. I mean, this is solid, muscle is solid, heart muscle is solid, but blood vessels are hollow and it contains fluid. The walls have a different density than the fluid and have a different density from the heart. When these high frequency sound waves bounce off of different structures and come back, what they did therapeutically back, and they're still used in a lot of physical therapy modalities, they generate heat. That vibration is heat. So that's kind of deep heat. When you put something on your skin, you used to have something like a rub called mentholatum deep heat. It wasn't deep at all. It's just your skin. Okay. To get inside, you had to use something like ultrasound in order to be able to generate that. And that's where it's still used. For years, it was hot packs and ultrasound, Whirlpool and ultrasound were go-tos in sports medicine for ages. Now we have a lot of it stays the same, and we have certain advancements. They took this in the age of computers, and effectively what they did was the signal bounces back at you. They read that signal, created a digital algorithm, and basically were able to generate a series, depending on how they did this, and be able to scan that area and come up with how the baby is developing, the gender, which a lot of people are very interested in, I understand, but we use it in breast. I mean, it's when someone discovers a mass in a breast, I mean, one of the first things is it fluid filled or is it solid? Solid is bad, fluid is good. Fluid is a cyst. Those are by definition benign. Solid could be a problem. So, I mean, all of those and that's where ultrasound comes from. If someone has a heart murmur, we do a thing called an echocardiogram, the echo being the reflected sound. We have a device called a Doppler that came about. We started to use it about 50 years ago, where you could actually listen to the blood flowing. And when it goes through a narrow vessel, it kind of makes a high-pitched kind of a squeak. That tells you if you have a narrow vessel, maybe that could form a blood clot. Or maybe that's the context. MRIs, not a whole lot different. As far as we know, they're not. It evolved from a thing called magnetic resonance devices. Is something we used in the chemistry lab when I was a undergraduate student. You won't believe this. Prepared not to believe. 54 years ago.
No.
God bless you. I have a new best friend. Thank goodness. Somebody bit. My wife will laugh. She's got such a wonderful way with me. But you're something old. Not that funny. Nevertheless, what we would do is we would analyze organic compounds, dissolve them in a special liquid, and basically spin the magnet around them. And what happens, the protons, which you're going to come to learn, are basically hydrogen ions. It's nothing more than a proton. And protons are super important. And what they would do is when something resonates, you impart energy from the magnets. It causes them to jump an energy level. You get a reading. And when they resonation is when they release a different kind of energy as they drop back down, as they stop spinning, so to speak. That's kind of how resonance works. It's kind of how lasers work in a different kind of way, depending on the material that's there. Nevertheless, we were able to analyze the chemical construct. We took that, we're made of organic chemicals, had a computer algorithm, and all of a sudden said, now let's do it to the whole body. And all of a sudden you could take that computer algorithm and effectively take these magnets, they're extraordinarily powerful magnets, they're spinning around, and be able to get a picture of the interna. How much different it is. Now we can directly find out before we have to operate if somebody tore an ACL or a PCL, anterior and posterior cruciate ligaments, things we talk about in this class and you talk about in lab. And it's great, and it's a wonderful time of year for all this stuff. Sports medicine is everywhere. The start of the football season, injuries go. So I mean, even if you're not a sports fan, it's easy to find examples of things like that. That's the context we use. Their importance. So here, the cell, everything consists of cells. All cells come from pre-existing cells. The internal environment is really what we'll explore next time. But the idea of homeostasis is the maintenance, keeping around what we call a set point. We'll get to it. So if I had given everybody a digital thermometer and said, take your temperature, you'd all come up with similar temperatures, I would wager. But if I said at the end of the class to take it again, some would be the same, some would be different. Temperature, blood pressure, all the vital signs, respiration, pulse, are effectively snapshots that vary around this set point. So you and I will be similar, assuming we're all functioning normally, but there are differences throughout the day. Blood sugar would be the same way. Even for someone who's a diabetic, even for someone who's an unstable diabetic, there would be a reasonable degree of variation. We have to look at the patterns that are there. But homeostasis allows us, assuming we're healthy, to maintain that without having to worry about oh, I'm hot, I better up the AC, get up and do that. I may not be in an environment where I can do that. I may be outside for a while. I may be in the middle of a lecture hall. I really don't have, we can't even change that. Don't even ask. I got to get in touch with the physical plant. I sent many of you an email. It was like 92 in here. The air conditioners still aren't going to be put in until probably over winter break. So we might have a very cold day or a very warm day in here. And if it's really super warm and intolerable, we'll go remote. That type of thing. So we're going to deal more with that. Cells depend on other cells. If you don't have, I was talking about the bone marrow. The bone marrow is a very interesting area. The interior of bones, what we call the bone marrow, something called the medullary cavity. It's got all these little wonderful nooks and crannies. Really, that's the best way. It's like a honeycomb of bone. And it's draped with particular kinds of like lining cells that you've learned about. Those lining cells form a platform for a variety of cells that are really stem kind of cells. They are parent cells that can change, fancy word which we'll get to is differentiate, into platelets, little fragments, red cells carrying oxygen, and white cells, of which there are 5 major varieties, all from that same parent. And that's not the ultimate stem cell. The ultimate stem cell would be embryonic stem cell tissue. And when you do the blood, you'll learn about that mega parent, so to speak. Okay, and you'll be able to go from there. Like it's like a cytohemoblast, something like that. The name's just not, every so often I forget something. Okay. I can't forget my anniversary. You know why? We got married on 9/11.
Oh.
Not that 9/11. But that way you can't forget. No, you can't forget. 9/11/13. That's odd. So comparatively speaking, we're newlyweds. Having both been married to somebody else for 30 years prior to that. But we digress. It's just 30. There's no reason you have to compound a mistake. Unfortunately, we all get along very, very well. Thankfully, after all these years, when things like that happen, when you have children and grandchildren and great grandchildren, it's a little different. Now you got to kind of put that stuff aside. Very much so. But nevertheless, that's an interdependency. It's got to have a platform to make all those blood things that are there. And like I said, when we talk about bone, which we talk about in this unit, it's amazing. That's all about surface area. The body has so many ways to take small areas and create surface area, like all those nooks and crannies, like a honeycomb, like your brain. Maybe 1 trillion cells. How do we fit them? We fold and we fold and we fold and we fold and we package them very tightly because we're sticking them in a relatively small box. The cranium. There's not a whole lot of room in there. So it's very, very interesting to see anatomical, and those are concepts that I reiterate more than once. I talk about them a lot. We'll get to structure and function, as it were. Energy. Okay. Yeah, all that energy. So I grab lunch between my 2 hours of lecture, 9 and 10, and then these 12 and 1. So I grab something in my office. And so that energy, okay, whatever I had a burger or something, because I had a chicken burger. If you had something like that, that energy, proteins are there, carbs, fats, whatever, is not magically all going to be utilized. Some of it is it's all going to be broken down. We basically suck the energy out of bonds. Some of it we're going to be used for me to walk back and forth, to do some paperwork that I had to do this, to do that. I had to run back up here over the lab for something. Some of it's going to be used for storage. We are very conservative with it. We sort of penny pinch our energy. What we do is we try to find ways to basically create energy without spending a whole lot of energy. That's what organisms do. If you don't have a letter, that's why bacteria reproduce. All their energy that they use is for reproduction. We have a whole thing We have to interact. We got to do this. We got to get dressed. I've never met a bacteria that had a big closet full of things. I haven't. I've never met an E. coli that was fashion sense. We have no E. coli influencer. Isn't that a current term? Again, my pop culture references are from 1970. So I have nothing that I have to get it from my grandkids. So moving on. So what do? The major way in the body that we basically have available energy is concentration gradients. So much so that we take those and we'll even intentionally create extra ones just to almost increase our amount. We'll spend some of our own energy to make concentration. Our energy comes in a currency that you're going to learn about called ATP. Fancy name, adenosine triphosphate. How do we make that? Those protons, which come from the foods we eat. We suck the energy out of the bonds that they make with hydrogen, and we take that energy, and effectively, we have inside in the cells, we have little organelles called mitochondria, which we'll learn about. And we basically we take those protons and we have a membrane that's permeable. We're on one side, we take these protons and we shove them to the other side. So we create an abundance on one side and very little on the other side. It's a gradient. We're expending energy because we know that the ones on this side will want to come this way. They're going to go from higher concentration to lower concentration. On their way coming back here, what they do is they go through an interestingly shaped protein that acts like, almost like the Niagara Falls. Okay, it's acting in such a way that it spins. Okay, it's basically going to create, almost like you would an alternator in a car. It's going to create energy. And we're going to capture that energy. That's just part of it. So we spent energy because we're actually going to increase the amount. Why do we do it with protons? Even better. Not only do we have more protons are positively charged. So not only do we have a gradient of protons to protons, we have a positive to negative gradient. That's got a fancy name called the chemiosmotic theory. So the protons come even faster, generate more energy. It's like a turbine. That chemiosmotic theory is a Nobel Prize winning piece of stuff that came out, I don't know, within the last 50 years. How's that? Maybe 60 years. That's what we do. We're stingy. We'll even take things, our kidneys. Our kidneys get rid of waste products. Sometimes we'll reclaim waste products out of the start of our urine, only to secrete them later because we'll create a gradient and it can take other bad stuff and get rid of it at the same time. There's something called co-transport. We use it all the time. We even bring stuff in, and in the backwashes, we push it in and creates like waves coming from the shore, pushed out, and we do something called anti-transport. All this neat stuff in an effort to conserve energy. So, and we're very efficient as an organism, but in the real world, we'd be very inefficient. So, and what I had for lunch, eventually that energy, if it's processed properly, for every gram, and most of the time it kind of works its way eventually to glucose, more or less, very simple sugar. That's our major energy source, and kind of all roads lead there for most of the stuff we ingest. If we get a unit of glucose, we only make about 40% of it into energy. The rest we lose as heat. What that tells you is it sounds very inefficient, even though we're as efficient as any organism on the planet. Whenever you're starting to do energy transformations, you lose some of that energy as heat. You have to. 60% may seem like a lot, but in reality, if it was a business, you'd probably be in bankruptcy. Every time I do this, I lose 60 cents on every dollar. You'll be in big trouble. Okay? So these are just some of the things that are there. So we have signaling mechanisms that allow us. Most of the membranes, when you talk about oxygen and carbon dioxide, okay, that are there, oxygen comes in, carbon dioxide goes out. They follow concentrate, they get right through membranes. Not all membranes are created equal. We have a membrane what we'll learn about called the blood-brain barrier, where things that are water soluble can't get to your brain. Medicines have to be specially designed to be able to be effectively be fat soluble enough because of a barrier that's created by the construction of the blood vessels. That's the context I'm trying to. So understand, it's not as simple as all that. And again, no one's going to ask you about that. I'm trying to do something I hate to use the term, the word I came up with was justify. I'm trying to get across the point about the importance of what we're doing in an effort. Because a lot of times, if you're in healthcare, people are going to ask you questions. I mean, a very good answer is I don't know. But don't leave it at that. Say, I don't know, particularly what you're doing. Sometimes try to find out. I don't know, but people will respect that. You can't know everything. It's just the way it is. You want to, the amount of what you do in any job that you begin to do, is how you perform it. I mean, if you do everything in good faith like that, I think you get farther ahead. That's just me. Okay, saying it. So that's the way I try to conduct things. By the same token, you're going to have like when we have exams and stuff like that, and I'm going to get to it here in these PowerPoints. There's errors in PowerPoints all the time. A lot. I mean, got to be careful. With me, if you say, look, if you say the PowerPoint, if I tell you the PowerPoint's wrong, good luck. But if you say, look at the textbook, it says this, but you said something differently, then I was wrong and I'll correct that. I'm good with that. My ego can take, Lord knows it can take. You're going to find out, it takes a while when you're in college, who are approachable and who are not. Other people that people who have been here for a while give you yeah, some people have very thin skin. Differentiation. So that's why I asked you about the lab. You studied lining tissues, right? A little bit for those who have lab. If you didn't, you're going to get it. So a lining tissue, talked about epithelium. Is that ringing a bell? Epithelial tissues are everywhere. The outside of your skin, the epidermis, all lining tissues, your mouth. Very similar. These die and flake off. The ones in your mouth are still living cells and they flake off. It doesn't matter. We have so many of them. We lose them. Okay? Lining in your stomach. Your stomach and small intestine and large intestine, those cells are replaced in their entirety every 3 to 6 days. Get a whole new set. Billions with a B cells every day. Told you about the bone. That's what happened. They can do so because they're what we call undifferentiated. They haven't grown or developed characteristics that are complex. They still are functional, but they're not complex, so they're easy to replace. And again, we replace our cells, not repair ourselves. That's the good news. Their reproductive rate is extraordinarily rapid. A skin cell takes from when it's born, roughly on an average for most of about 30 days, till we get rid of it. Every 30 days, whole unit of skin's going away, getting a new one. I think that's why, scraping myself like that will disappear over time. For a young person, relatively quickly. For some, depending on your skin as well, your skin color and tone and things like that. Older likely take a little bit longer. Okay, that's the good news. The bad news with things that haven't differentiated a lot, things go wrong in reproduction. I have a word for that, cancer. The very famous ones for these, when you have epithelial cells that turn cancers, and we're going to study the cell cycle in mitosis, they're called carcinomas. The most common kinds of cancers are carcinomas by far. The most common cancer we did not know are skin cancers. Probably 1 in 5 of us during our lifetime will have some skin cancer. Don't go home and make our goal tonight, please. Most of them are what are called the basal cell carcinoma. You size them, you cauterize them, good to go. They're more cosmetic than anything else. They don't spread. You don't have to do aftercare or radiation or chemicals. Good news, they're not all like that. The most common cancers that give us a big headache are glandular cancers. They're called adenocarcinomas. The ones that trouble us, women breast and men prostate. So those are epithelial cells. They're just arranged differently. they're basically like in glands, and we look a little bit at the sort of the anatomy of glands. I know you'll do that in lab, along with those epithelial cells. And unfortunately, they have a lot of problems that are associated with them, and extraordinarily too many. Word to the wise, bump up your vitamin D consumption. You take a little, take a lot. You can get it. You can get vitamin D from fish oils. That's tremendously healthy. Don't you just it says take 3 of these little guys a day. Take 3. Physicians are now up on that. Has been shown very satisfactorily to deal with a lot of problems, not the least of which are prostate and breast cancer. Okay, so that's another. So now on the flip side of that, we'll go back to our buddy here, the heart. Here, that's highly differentiated. You don't ever see out of these cells like this. Okay, that cell has reached its state of maturity. That's the good news. It doesn't reproduce. That means it can't get cancer. That's even better news. Okay, there's bad news. It doesn't get better news. It loses its blood supply. The fancy term is called an infarction. Not infection, that's caused by a microorganism like a bacteria or a virus or something similar. Infarction means death of tissue, or cell in this case, from lack of oxygen. There's no coming back. It's dead, it's dead. So when you have myocardial infarction, we have a common term for that, heart attack. Understand that it doesn't all mean that they're going to be fatal. And so a lot of people are silent. But don't, if somebody says to you, oh, it was just a mild heart attack, nothing was damaged, that's wrong. It was a heart attack. Cells have died, they're never coming back. Whether or not there was something that limited function or ability or capability to do activities, that's different. It's all about how much, where it's located, isn't it critical or non-critical area. Well, and same is true for a brain with something called a stroke. There are a lot of people discover they had a heart attack, and one day they just, oh God, I had indigestion, and then 10 years later they'll have some tests for an insurance policy. Go, this is very interesting. That happened. They said that to me, and it was turned out to be wrong. From I was having a procedure done. I had to get an EKG, and I said to my physician yelling and screaming, probably while you were tired. And what the hell are you doing? He goes, they machine read the electrocardiograms now. It said, something like you had a previous heart attack and then no change from last time. WTF are they talking about? That's exactly what I said to him. He goes, no, you didn't have a heart attack. It's just the machines read these things now. People don't. The machines read it, and it's a whole AI thing, but we don't want to go there. So that's part of it as well. We're almost done. So growth and development are when we talked about reproduction, and we talked about responsiveness or reaction to stimuli, and movements are self-explanatory. Growth is something we do increase in number. Certain structures only increase in size. Muscle, we can't make more. Okay, I mean, there's some limited research to suggest maybe we can even as an adult, some muscle cells can develop, but I haven't seen definitive studies about it. But we enlarge. If you go and start to work out, they'll get bigger. If for whatever reason you stop, you had an injury, they'll get small. Nothing unusual about that. So I understand we use them, they'll build up more mitochondria, more myoglobin. And then when we don't, for whatever reason, either by choice or because something has happened, then that will change back to the way it was. And development is a little bit different. Some cells have a remark, and that's when you start talking about a true stem cell. Most people are familiar with somebody who has saved cord blood, maybe for a child, and have frozen it or somehow preserved it. Typically, they're frozen, and in hopes that a stem cells research become truly have advanced enough that where we can utilize to grow an organ that's compatible with you, whether it's new nerves, whether it's part of a spinal cord, whether it's a new whatever. Okay. Is that coming down the road? Yeah, I suspect it is. Is it coming in my lifetime? Certainly not. Is it coming in yours, maybe? I don't know. But there are a lot of people, and I'll begin to share anecdotes with you about some experience that I have with regard to that. But there's a lot of, I told you about a stem cell. You have a stem cell that makes your bone and cartilage. You have stem cells that make, we're talking about the blood. They're different kinds of stem cells, meaning that they're not necessarily embryological tissue or fetal tissue. Embryological would be a better term, but still have the ability to change based on different signals. What the signals are, why all of a sudden this starts to happen or that starts to happen, that's not clearly understood. And maybe it should or maybe it shouldn't. Again, this is sort of the follow-up on metabolism. This is where I kind of say I vigorously do not agree with whoever wrote this. Again, PowerPoints are not subject to editorial review. They are not a guideline. Textbooks are, scholarly articles are, some Yahoo expression. I'll build it, some chemical reactions, energy production and nutrient cycling, okay. If we don't make energy, obviously this person did not have the first principles of science. Energy can neither be created nor destroyed, only transformed. Nobody's making no energy, to say in my old neighborhood. It ain't happening. Forget about it. Making energy, not happening. Respiration, you have to define. Pulmonary respiration, expelling carbon dioxide, bringing in oxygen, which is necessary for energy transformations. At the cellular level, we give the cells that require that oxygen the oxygen, and we pick up waste products, because the waste products would preclude the efficiency of that system. And we'll look at that, not in gory detail, but enough that you have the basics of it. That's what this course is about. That's truly what respiration is. Digestion, again, when you digest something, you have to break it down into usable pieces. Digestion and absorption are not equal. The alimentary canal is a hollow tube that goes through you. Within it and the adaptations, it breaks stuff down mechanically and chemically. You learn about that in EP2. When it's absorbed, again, it's the simplest product. Proteins are amino acids. We create simple sugars. We'll learn about this shortly, called monosaccharides. We can't digest disaccharides. That's why people are lactose intolerant. Lactose is a disaccharide. Typically, we're born with the inability. And it begins to develop. We develop the enzyme to allow that to occur. We go into that. So if you're wondering, and it's a funny thing because some people are born with it, and then it goes away. Some people have it, okay? They can tolerate lactose, and all of a sudden they can't. I have 2 stepchildren who, both these younger men, I mean, when I first knew them, dairy was fine. Then all of a sudden, no more. And I mean, they get really sick. So it can go away. It's very hard. It's like allergies very hard when they come and go. Nevertheless, an absorption is actually bringing it into the bloodstream, circulation. We move things around. And obviously, when it comes to waste products, we rid ourselves of a variety of them. Expelling carbon dioxide by exhaling it is one way. Urination is another, defecation is another. I mean, and then this is pretty straightforward. We're 70 to 80% water, all the stuff it does, food. And I mean, if you want to make a case, does oxygen release energy from food? I don't buy it. You'll learn about the role for oxygen and what it does technically. But I mean, in a simplistic way, we would say it assists in the release of energy from food. I'll buy it. And unfortunately, what we do see with PowerPoints is they tend to make simple declarative statements that occasionally are, and sometimes frequently are, inaccurate. Just saying. All right, everybody. I'll see everybody on, I appreciate your attention. I'll see everybody on Friday.